Hey, it's Alex. Welcome to Papertrail. My guest this month is Sophie Macintosh. She's the winner of this year's White Review Short Story Prize. We had a great conversation. Just a quick note, I had some technical issues with my audio and had to use a safety recording, so this episode may sound a little rough around the edges. I hope you can forgive that, so you can hear Sophie's thoughts on 3 of her top books. I think she's an author that we're going to hear a lot more about in the future. That's enough from me. Here I am, speaking with Sophie Macintosh.
Well, I have quite a long commute, not like a super long commute, but it's definitely an hour on the tube each. And I really fought it at first, but I got a Kindle app on my iPad, and that actually has really helped because I kind of was always really, I hate e-readers, I'm never going to get into it, I love books. And actually having the app on my iPad has just made me read like so much more, like an incredible amount more, because you just have all these books all the time with you. It's actually pretty useful, and I've started reading a lot more.
I found that something similar when I had a job where I had about an hour and a half's drive, and the amount of podcasts I consumed on those drives was ridiculous.
It's rare that you kind of just find an hour at home to sit down and just like read. At least it is for me, because there's so many other things to be doing. But yeah, on the commute, like what else am I going to do?
Great. Well, I'd love to get to your book choices. Starting with the first one that you sent me, which was Morvern Callar. Could you tell us a little bit about Morvern Callar, sort of set the scene?
Yep, so it's a book about a woman and her boyfriend dies suddenly, or she finds him dead, he's killed himself, and it's kind of what she does beyond that. And that's when it kind of becomes really interesting, because of her reactions and what she does. And what she does is, can I use spoilers? Can I? Yes,
yeah, we can talk about the book in spoiler terms. Maybe not aggressive spoilers, but yeah, talk a little bit about what happens.
Okay, well, so after she finds his body, she also discovers that he's written a book, and she decides to pass the book off as her own, and it's kind of the beginning of her own journey out of her small town where she lives, which is in Scotland. I think it's based on Morvern, and basically her propels her into the wider world. But it's really, really interesting in terms of asking those questions, like, what is she doing? It's obviously what she's doing is completely wrong, but at the same time, is it so wrong? It's really interesting, because you do root for her, even though you're like, she's quite a scary character.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would agree. Like, it was one of the first things I thought was like, I shouldn't like this person. But she's really quite compelling, almost quite single-minded as well in what she wants to do. And I think maybe that's why she's so likable, is because she does really, like, she knows what she wants to do. She wants to go on holiday, and she's going to go on holiday, God damn it. Like, sort of, and all the sort of stuff that comes out of that. I found that, I was surprised how much I rooted for her.
I wouldn't say she was like likable. I don't know. It's just, like the rooting for her. I guess you can kind of tell that what she's doing is her survival, and she's kind of almost been waiting for an opportunity for a while, but not really realised it. Like, I kind of get the impression she's just kind of been surviving the whole way through. Now this is her chance, and she's not even really thought about it. It's almost just like instinct.
Yeah, and there's no hesitation, is there, in what she does, really? It's she just goes for it. Well, I'm curious, when did you encounter the book? What was sort of going on with you, and what were you up to when you came across it?
So I was living in Glasgow at the time, where you live now. And I was really enjoying it, but I didn't really know many people around. And then my friend came to visit and brought me a copy because he thought I'd really like it. And it kind of took me a little while to get around to reading it or even get into it. But then when I started reading it, I was just like, wow. And I guess it really spoke to me as well, because I was used to seeing the kind of landscape around. Like, I've been to the Highlands, I've been to Morvern. I was quite familiar with that sort of town anyway, because I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Wales. So it just kind of really spoke to me.
Yeah, it's quite. I mean, I never really grew up on sort of in a remote town or on the fringes of somewhere, but it seems like quite a patient sort of picture of what it could be like to grow up in a remote town or somewhere far away from not civilization, but from built up areas. I found that very compelling, like the fact that everyone, the way that it's quite nice because everyone gets a little bit of time and a little bit of description from Morvern herself, I guess, because when there aren't that many people around, you get to know everyone, and everyone's got their nicknames and everyone's got their habits. So there's really nice character portraits throughout the book as well, which I really enjoyed.
I thought it was interesting as well, that kind of, she goes to the party and she's at the pub and they're just always like doing drugs and drinking loads, even in the small town. And when she moves to Ibiza, when she kind of gets the book advance and she's kind of doing that same kind of thing, I thought it was interesting, that kind of, I know, that hedonism and that nihilism. It's not like in the small town she was still kind of having that urge to.
Yeah, no, I think that sense that she's sort of initially trapped in that initial escape I found that very interesting, and also I guess sort of the circularity of the novel. Not to sort of spoil what happens towards the end, but there is a sort of, even though she may escape for a while, the idea that she is eventually going to be pulled back seems to be quite central. That was something that I really took away from it at the end.
Yeah, that sense that she's. It's like where is she going? She hasn't really thought things out. And I guess this is something that kind of relates to another one of the books I picked as well, which is Nobody's Ever Missing, but that sense that you can't like really escape yourself in the end, wherever you go, and she's still kind of doing the same things. But yeah, I really admire her for just throwing herself into that world and not hesitating.
Yeah, no, I think the idea of you're not being able to escape something in all three of the books that you've recommended to me. Actually, I think that's something quite at this. It's right there, like the idea that you cannot escape something massive in your life, whether it is what Morvern's running from, what Illyria is running away from, and in Ice as well, the physical thing that they're running away from. I found that quite interesting as a pattern between your three books. I'm curious what your reaction was when Morvern claims her dead boyfriend's novel as her own. How did what was your reaction to that?
I guess a really horrible secret part of me was like, yeah, go for it. He's not there anymore, and this is maybe your chance. And then but at the same time, obviously horrified, like it's not the correct moral decision. But then I think that's what the book. There's no judgment in any of it really. It's not saying something's right or wrong. It's just doing it. Yeah,
she just does it and she goes for it. And and like we said, maybe it doesn't make her likable, but it certainly makes her compelling.
Yeah.
And the way that she does it, it's the perfect crime, like the way she perfectly executes it. You're like, have you thought about doing something like this before? I found initially at those initial scenes where she is hiding her boyfriend's body.
Yeah.
I don't know, like it's interesting because you're obviously getting it through her point of view, and it's very calm and very sort of just collected, and she's doing exactly what she needs to do to survive, sort of like you said, or what she believes she needs to do to survive. No, I think she's a fascinating character. She's one of my favourite characters that I've read in quite a while, I think.
I mean, she's so calm, it's just it's mad because the thing with her boyfriend's body, like for ages I kind of didn't realise what was actually happening, and then I was like, oh, she's literally chopping him up and burying him. Wow. And that's when you kind of think there's obviously something not quite normal about her reactions, because she can't be really that calm underneath it, and you're thinking, I think that's what's interesting with Morvern for me as well, because you never, even though she's narrating the whole thing, you actually don't really know what she's thinking. There's only kind of occasional hints where she gets like upset or she mentions crying, and you think, wow, this really horrible traumatic event has happened to her. And she's not as calm as she seems on the surface, I think, or if she is, because she's just not really, she's kind of reacting to it in a way that is kind of, there's no right or wrong way to react to it, but
no, I think her hardiness sort of comes through in the writing. Like you sort of get the surface matter-of-fact description of what she's doing, and then occasionally something like her having a little cry sort of slips through, and you sort of realize like there's other stuff going on, but she's holding you as the reader back so that you don't get everything about her. She's very protective about sort of her personal stuff. No, I found her really, really interesting, and I I would certainly, if someone was looking for interesting characters, this would be a book that I pointed them straight at.
With regards to the, I just thought something quickly about the book when she put Salon on it as well. I found it really funny when she went to meet with the publishers and stuff, and they would like, yes, it's amazing female voice, and that made me laugh.
Yeah, no, that's quite a lovely sort of series as well. Where she goes down to London and sort of gets shown around and wined and dined, and she's sort of out of place there and just sort of like, but again, she just goes for it.
I guess, well, like when we learn more about her boyfriend and kind of the fact that he's kind of betrayed her and stuff, and then he's kind of foisted this upon her too, and she's had to come and find him, and then he's kind of had the gall to be like, I've written this book, can you get it published in my name? And she's a bit like, well, actually, no, I can't. How dare you do this to me? Maybe I'll take it for myself.
Yeah. There were some interesting links, I think, between this book and your second book, which we've already mentioned, sort of Nobody Is Ever Missing, in that it is a sort of essentially one person, one woman sort of going off and, you know, reacting to something that has happened in her life and just trying to either deal with it or forget about it or just sort of move away from it. So I found, I think there's an interesting trend through all three of these books, which I'd be interested to talk about.
After I sent them to you, I kind of realised they'd actually make quite a good ones to read, like 3 in a row.
I find quite often that happens, like with all of them. Like there's normally a thread going through all of the books. It's quite interesting what your subconscious picks out as your 3 key books and how they link together. So let's get straight on to the second book, which is Nobody Is Ever Missing. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yep. So the narrator, Illyria, just ups and leaves one day and moves to New Zealand, and she doesn't tell her family, she doesn't tell her husband. She kind of leaves a good job and her marriage and her apartment and just goes to New Zealand to stay with someone she's met once at a party. And she kind of has this idea of like his farm, his ranch in New Zealand, and that she can stay there and basically just buy herself some time, I guess, and not really have to think. She doesn't really have a plan per se. Like it's kind of almost like this panic reaction to her life, I suppose. She just ups and goes.
I think panic reaction is a great description of it. There doesn't seem to be much immediate rational thought behind her decision. She just gets up and goes to the other side of the world.
When she talks about kind of getting currency and stuff, and she doesn't plan ahead that much, she doesn't have like that many traveller checks and stuff, because that would kind of make it real. Just kind of she ups and goes, and to me it's kind of, I mean, who hasn't wanted to do that? It's almost like a wish fulfillment. You always think about being brave enough to just leave, but she actually does it, and she just goes, but there's no reason for it. Well, there doesn't seem to be a reason at first, but obviously as the book goes on, you kind of realise, there's reasons for what she's doing.
It's quite a new book.
It was pretty new, but I came across it because someone posted a quote from it on Instagram, of all things, and I was kind of scrolling through, and immediately it was like, whoa, what is this from? I really want to read this book, so I immediately kind of got my hands on it and instantly just loved it. And I think I don't know, maybe it's just something about its immediacy, and I guess it feels like super of its time, super now, not in a trendy way, but just in the sense that it's, I think, grabbing a feeling that a lot of people are feeling.
What was the quote? What was the quote on Instagram? Can you remember?
So many really good lines in it. I'm trying to look for it earlier, but I couldn't grab it.
It's full of really beautiful sort of individual moments of writing. The moment where she's on the ferry and the stingrays, I think it's wounded and swimming along below her. That scene really sticks with me. But it's a very it has really beautifully written moments throughout, which I really enjoyed. But I always find it interesting when quite a new book makes it onto someone's top 3, because it has to have been quite impactful to sort of
it's kind of displaced other books and kind of like made it fought its way to the top of the queue. But I guess it's kind of, when you pick your favorite things, you pick the ones that are your favorite for you right now, and the ones that are having the impact on you. So it just felt a lot more relevant to kind of my life of the last few years and stuff.
What could you think of a book that it displaced? What did it kick off the podium?
I guess I was thinking when I was trying to get the shortlist of books for this, I was finding it really hard. There's so many that I really liked, and I think one that I really fought between this one and The Virgin Suicides. They're like really different books, and I guess I just picked this one because it was more what was interesting me now, and that was a book that I like really loved since my teens. But I think both of them have kind of, there's this quote I really like by Renata Adler, and she talks about the momentum of last resort, and sometimes you just have to throw a grenade and like propel yourself. And I think that's what this book is about, but also kind of in the Virgin Suicides, they have that momentum of last resort as well, but for them it's kind of obviously a more tragic ending, but for Illyria it kind of propels her into this new world, this last ditch attempt to kind of find meaning, I guess.
And it's quite, I'm curious about, so a lot of the, when I was sort of reading up on this, a lot of people were talking about how it's quite funny and how it's blackly funny. And I'm curious, did you find it to be quite funny as well, or because I sometimes struggled to laugh. I was sort of like, oh god, do you like it's what you're doing is you're running away from something, and there are moments which are funny, but I suppose that's what makes it blackly funny, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
I wasn't like, there weren't laugh out loud moments, but there's just so much absurdity in it. Like the people she meets, there's a point where she gets into a hitchhiker's car and she kind of looks at him and is like, yeah, he's exactly the kind of person I shouldn't get in a car with. But I'm going to, and then it just turns to like that the scene where he takes her to his friend's house and he pretends that she's his wife.
Oh yes, that's great.
And you kind of like, it could be a scary scene, but the whole absurdity of it just makes it funny. But at the same time, you get the sense that it's funny, but she's not laughing, and so you just feel kind of removed from it. So I wasn't laughing, but I could see the humour in the situation. But like here, I kind of felt removed from it, I guess. Yeah, the fact that she's constantly being warned by both men and women that she is on the verge of being like cut up by people, and like you can't trust anyone on the road. They're going to cut you up, and they're going to do horrible things to you. Like the fact that she consistently gets this warning, and she's like, yeah, whatever, just sticks her thumb out and goes again. I guess that is quite funny, and I think what was quite interesting about her as a character is it sort of, you almost get a reverse of Morvern, in that you're in her the entire time, like you're in her head, and sort of just all of this turmoil that's going through, and then every now and again you leave and you sort of see this world, and you get these moments that are happening outside of her, and they're really, really lovely moments and really lovely people quite often, and you get pulled back into her turmoil, and sort of it's like you're in a cyclone, and for a second you get flung out and you get to see everything, and then you get pulled back into it. I sort of really got that feeling as I was reading the book. Yeah, definitely. She gives away more than Morvern does, for sure. I guess with Morvern I always thought, I imagined her having this like difficult past, because those are things that are like been hinted at, but at the same time it never became more than a feeling, whereas in this one you kind of, I think it's almost daring you to find a reason, because there is this like very obvious reason about why she's gone and done it. She feels like she doesn't have a reason, that she doesn't deserve to feel like that. Yeah, and that's the whole relationship that she sort of developed with her husband afterwards as well. It's a very weird, she has weird personal relationships, like both in the lead up to when she comes across to New Zealand, and also the sort of people that she chooses to hang out with. Like they're always sort of either emotionally dependent in one way or dependent on the absence of emotion. Like it feels like quite often her marriage was this sort of two people who had been shaken to the core by something and just like clinging to each other to know that someone else sort of felt the same way. Yeah, definitely. It's a fascinating, but I remember actually listening to an interview with her on another podcast and thinking that it sounded really interesting. So I was really happy to have an opportunity to pick it up and give it a go. Yeah, I think Catherine Lacey is really amazing at like picking out the details in people. And I mean, I always remember how she describes a bartender as tender. Yes. And I was just like, it's perfect. Like, tender, this like wonderful bar lady who just brings them drinks without even having to ask, and she kind of is this like beautiful fountain of empathy, even though she doesn't say a single word, and all she had to do to describe it was just say one word twice. Yeah. Really amazing. Yeah, I think she really shows her capability at capturing people and moments in this book. Just like I said, with those moments when you do leave Illyria and you go out and you see everyone, you get a feel for sort of Catherine Lacey's, I'm not sure if it's love for people, but sort of interest in people and sort of desire to capture them at their best, actually. So probably is love for people. Like there aren't many people I think who get a super bad shtick in
nobody is ever missing. Everyone is sort of given this sort of even-handed description where
it's very neutral.
Yes, yeah, and sort of shell-shocked, I suppose, is which would follow with sort of the tone of
Callar, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a fantastic book, and again, I think the landscape in this is, New Zealand as a landscape is present in it in the same way. Not so, like Morvern Callar is less about the landscape, but you do get moments where it's very much a person in a place, and again, this is sort of a person who has felt like an outsider for an incredibly long time, again, in a location where she is now physically an outsider and can almost, because of that, be herself.
Yeah.
I found, the sort of landscape, again, presence of landscape in both of them very interesting.
I find New Zealand, I find the setting of New Zealand interesting as well, because I guess of all the places on Earth, if you think of kind of just a really calm, green land. I mean, I've never been to New Zealand, but in my head, I'm just like imagining it like a massive Wales, really, and like very naturally beautiful, but also kind of not like massively diverse in terms of having lots of variation, but just like a very calm, endless green land. And I can imagine if you were running away from something, it would be like a very calming environment to be in.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very calm place, and it's a very welcoming place, which almost in a sense shows up Illyria's unwillingness to sort of be in contact with people. The person that she seeks out in New Zealand is the least emotionally available person in the book.
I guess just want someone not to talk to her, not to judge her, and just to leave her alone.
I'm trying to remember a quote that he says about her. He's like, where is it? I've written it down. It was something like, I know sadness, yours is inextricable, it's terminal. Like, sort of, he's not a happy presence. But I guess in a sense, maybe she's attracted to him or she's attracted to visiting him because she feels like maybe he does understand how she's feeling in a way that other people don't.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I didn't really like him as a character because I think he felt he could kind of analyse her, and he knew what was going on with her. He's
sort of a joke about it's the sort of pretentious artist or poet who sort of speaks in a specific way, and he's living the stereotype in a sense. He's this.
Yeah, I guess he felt like that she needed something from him, but I think all she needed from him was just literally just a place. I don't think it went any more than that, but I think he maybe had, I don't know, a different idea. He kind of, in the end, he was kind of repelled by her need, I guess. But it's kind of weird because it's kind of funny because it doesn't seem like she needs anything, but at the same time, maybe she does need so much stuff, and he can kind of see it, but she can't realise it.
So talking about that, and then talking about the idea of sort of maybe thinking you need something and then actually needing something else, I think that's maybe a good segue into our final book, which is Ice by Anna Kavan. Tell us a little bit about this book.
So a narrator is kind of thing for his ex-girlfriend or a girl he's in love with across the landscape, and across the whole world almost, it feels like, and some major unspecified event has happened, and we're never really told what it is. It's hinted at, but it could be lots of different things, but we kind of get the gist that it's something environmental, but we don't know what's caused it. So he is chasing her across this landscape, which is changing. It's becoming much colder. There's ice everywhere. Appropriate given the title. The whole world is basically freezing, but he's on this single-minded quest to find her, that she is being protected or kind of held prisoner. We don't really know which, by a man who we assume is a husband, and he sort of keeps changing too. It's kind of a weird one to get a handle on, isn't it? Because when I was reading it, there were so many bits where I was like, did I just miss a chunk? But then you realise that that's just what it's supposed to be. It's almost blackouts or something. When
I think now, thinking back to reading it, and I only finished it a week or so ago, I have this fuzziness in my head, like sort of white noise, trying to think about what happened and hold everything together. It's a real experience of a book, I think. I was just as interested researching Anna Kavan herself as I was the book after I finished it. She's a very fascinating woman.
Yeah, she's got quite a sad history. I mean, it sounds absurd that she became addicted to heroin because her tennis teacher recommended it to her because he said it would kind of improve her serve, and then she spent kind of the rest of her life fighting the addiction and in and out of kind of mental hospitals. It's really hard to kind of separate her history from her work sometimes, even though it's not necessarily like the right thing to do. But with a book like Ice, it's like, how do you kind of take away her own experience and her life from such a book? I don't know if it is like, I mean, I guess it's been interpreted as a book about her addiction and about constantly trying to escape it.
Yeah, and when I read that, I was like, okay, yeah, that does sort of make sense. The sort of this pursuit of something, of this, you know, the pursuit of the woman throughout it, and then you get it back and you realize that you don't want it again. Then you sort of step back and then immediately need to start pursuing it again. Like, I could totally see where that comes from.
Yeah, definitely.
It's quite an uneasy book as well. I felt quite uneasy as I was moving through it. Like, and I guess that makes sense with sort of this bizarre, unprecedented supposedly environmental disaster that is happening. Sort of everyone, it doesn't seem quite sure how to react to things.
Yeah, no one knows what's happening, and it's always kind of implied that the kind of higher ups aren't being entirely truthful about what's happening. There's this massive sense of like suspicion and things changing really quickly. I think, yeah, it's really, really apocalyptic, but because you just don't know what's happening, it's all that scarier. Because, yeah, I think if she'd kind of gone into the book and been like, oh, there's just been a nuclear war and now the entire world is going to be cloaked with ice, you kind of know what to expect, but you're just like, is it even real? What's happening? Is it temporary? Is it just the narrator like hallucinating? There are still parts in the book where they get to land where the ice hasn't hit yet, and you think, what's actually happening? And I can't even like really pin even a time period on it, because so many of the towns seem really archaic and old, and yeah, it's kind of disorientating, which I guess is the entire point.
No, yeah, I think that's a great word to use to describe it. It's really disorientating. And I thought just the whole approach was really interesting. The way that she jumps from perspective sometimes, like mostly you get it from this narrator, this who I think we assume is a male narrator, and sometimes you think that you've jumped perspective, but actually he's just like hallucinating or imagining something. Like, so you can never get comfortable even in the narrator's skin as you're going through. Like, everything is constantly changing and shifting and becoming different. And it's quite, like, I was thinking about the narrative, and it's quite a sort of action romp sometimes. Like, he's catching planes to various places and he's flying and then he's driving cars at high pace. It's all quite intense, yeah, almost, and jet setting.
There's no end point, is there? He's in this car chase and he kind of catches up, and then she's gone again, and then it has to go again. It's like it's cyclical. It's like this never-ending cycle. It can feel kind of exhausting.
Yeah, but he can't do anything but chase. Like, he has to chase. He has to go. But all sorts of moments, like if you could pitch the plot to someone and make it sound like a sort of, yeah, complete like action romp, and then someone would read it and come back and be like, what did you give me? Yeah, what did you just give me? This is, I mean, like, you're not wrong, but this is also not sort of, there's so much going on in the way the description is handled, and the I don't know, the way the interpersonal relationships are all very weird and interesting. It's, yeah, I put it down and I was like, Sophie, what did you just make me read? Like, it was, again, it's another quite lonely book. I felt anyway as I was reading it, like it's sort of it's all about either him being lonely or the girl that he's pursuing, like maybe her desire to be left alone.
Yeah. I felt really sorry for her, because she's just caught between these two men. It's kind of really horrible. There's a lot of violence kind of wreaked upon her, and she doesn't seem to have any agency herself. She's just like this, and the way they describe her as well, it's always about her like fragility, how she's like so close to being broken. He's talking about her being like splintered. It's really horrible, actually. It's kind of, yeah, he just keeps searching for her, and he's just not gonna get her. And it's just, I kind of,
nearly every time he finds her, he hurts her.
Yeah.
And it's horrible, which as a reader as well, you don't want him to catch up. You're like, okay, he's not going to catch her this time. And then when he does something horrible, and then he goes away and he starts it again. So you think about her perspective and the idea, like, for him, he's getting closer and closer to his objective. But for her, it must be this terrifying thing is getting closer and closer and closer every time.
He just wants to hurt her, and she's just kind of caught between them.
And then she eventually finds like some kind, later on in the book, you find that she's found someone who, it's implied, treats her quite well and treats her quite nicely. And he's sort of like brutally pushed aside. It's like, no, you don't get that.
I guess it's interesting because the other two books as well, they're very much about female agency. Like the female characters are single-mindedly kind of grimly doing what they have to do to survive, and she's doing that. She's quite almost reliant on the men. I don't know if she would be if she was kind of given the chance to survive, but I definitely got the impression, well, I guess I would because of the narrator, but I got the impression that she needed them. She kind of like hated and resented them, and they were terrible to her, but at the same time she's like kind of needed them to survive. You have to kind of compromise and do horrible things. Yeah,
I think it is a book that sticks with you when you read it, and it rewards. I imagine it will reward second readings as well. Because I actually hadn't initially, in the first section of the book where he goes to visit her and when she's living with her husband, and then he goes and disrupts everything, I'd then not connected that the warden that you meet is meant to be the same person.
He calls them by different names as well, so it can get confusing. But I think you just have to look for the clues in the sense that he's like this tall, big man guarding her. Yeah, there's sort of contrast of these big, burly men who go and do action things, and then this sort of little white-haired thing that needs protecting, is sort of a constant and unpleasant thing throughout the entire book, I think. Do you think there's the reason that these sort of three books in particular sort of jump out to you? Like, can you see a theme over all of them? I guess all three of them have really strong narrators and kind of like ambiguous narrators. That really appeals to me, especially when it comes to Morvern Callar and Nobody Is Ever Missing. Like, the voices are really unique. I mean, the voice is really unique in Ice as well, but it's more to do with, I guess, how the narrative, or kind of the lack of narrative. It's weird because in Ice, the voice is much more bombastic. There's like walls of ice and stuff is splintering and smashing. There's like boats smashing through ice. There's a real sense that the world is ending. I think there's a sense that the world is ending as well in the other two books, but it's more subtle, and it's ending for them, or they feel like kind of their own personal kind of apocalypse is coming, and they're trying to like escape it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah, no, totally.
Like there's a massive sense of nihilism through all the books.
Collapse is, like the idea of collapse is present in all of them. The collapse of Morvern's world as sort of her life changes, and then the deliberate destroying of Illyria's world as well, and then the actual destruction of the world in the final one. Collapse is probably a good way to link them all together.
They're all kind of having a breakdown and dealing with it in different ways.
Yeah, no, totally.
Surviving however they can. Yeah. How much influence do you think sort of your favorite books have on your writing? Do you feel like they stick around with you, or do you feel like it's more something that you read and you note away, and that's about it?
I guess, I think I'm influenced by them. I guess the key things I write, whatever I write, I don't like writing stuff that's necessarily grounded in reality. So everything I write is a bit weird, but I don't want it to be like explicitly weird. I really enjoy writing things that have something off about them. There's something not quite right, like, and you kind of think maybe they're in like a slightly future universe, or something where something has changed. It's still recognizable, but it's just got that amount of uncanniness in it. And I guess in Ice, it's kind of more explicitly like a post-apocalyptic sort of sci-fi kind of thing. But that uncanniness, like the way that Catherine Lacey writes, it really makes you kind of look at like objects and people in a different way. You kind of get a sense of how things are seen differently, and the same with Morvern. And the way they describe, the way they evoke stuff, that's been a big influence on me, I think. I just really admire how you can write about something like quite upsetting and scary and a good way but do it like taking a step back and kind of have that sense of numbness.
Yeah, I would agree. Like the kind of work I find where the weird stuff it's really easy to accept the weird stuff that's happening is done with that sort of matter of factness, and it gets dropped. It's not this oh my god, look at this giant wall of ice advancing on me, it is horrifying, and I'll just describe. It's more like there's ice coming, we need to do something. Like sort of the idea of something getting a small mention and it influencing the whole story, but they leave most of it to you is always something that I've really enjoyed as well when I'm reading stuff.
Yeah. I like narrators that seem a bit disengaged and can really, instead of being absorbed emotionally in like what's happening, a kind of a step back from it at all times and kind of observing it more and seeing things. That
sounds like a perfect line to end on. So Sophie, thank you very much for coming on the show and for your recommendations, and I know you've got some work coming out in the near future, and congratulations on the White Review prize. That was fantastic and really exciting to see.
Yeah, the new issue's coming out on 13th July.
I'll aim to get it out before then, so everyone who's listening, go out, get the White Review, read Sophie's story. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sophie Macintosh, her short story is called Grace. You can find it in the latest issue of the White Review, which is available now. Really failed on that deadline. Thanks to Sophie for coming on, Scott Grattan for our music, and thank you for listening. I hope you're enjoying the series. If you have any thoughts or feedback, you can tweet me at Papertrail or leave a message on the website www.papertrailpodcast.com. I'll be back next month with another episode. Until then, thanks for your time.